see. All right.
So welcome, Dilken, to this interview in software testing. And so, hi, and who are you? And
yeah, hi. So my name is Dilken. I am a software engineer. I primarily work with .NET systems.
Okay.
What I do right now, I work at my company called Crude Tech. I'm an IT consultancy company, and we work with primarily, we call ourselves a new tech team, but primarily just making sure that tech teams in Stockholm right now have a good environment that really makes sure that good quality tech thrives. I myself right now, I'm on assignment at a company called Trapets. We do financial solutions. So I specialize in fintech solutions. So we work with banking and compliance. So it's pretty transaction heavy stuff and pretty, stuff that you need to make sure is developed and tested properly. So
nice.
I do have an emphasis on making sure those processes are in place properly.
So you do quite a bit of testing then, I guess.
Yes, me and my team do a lot of testing, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, and how big is the team? How big is
so my team right now, we're only 4 people in the development team, and then we do have a product owner as well. So we work in something that's very popular right now, Agile. I can actually start by just showing our workflow in the development team really briefly. But so here we see, the traditional method is often called development and test method, called waterfall. And what's become very popular is a set of principles called Agile, which we work in sprints. So we use Scrum. There are a lot of Agile frameworks, process frameworks, but we use Scrum, the most popular one. So we work in sprints. Here, so you plan a sprint, and a sprint is 2 weeks at Trapets. Here we see that development and test work very closely together in the sprint. So in that 2 weeks, we have a set amount of things to develop and test and make sure that they follow the business logic. I can actually scroll by to here we can see that when working agilely, the managers, developers, and testers work very closely together, especially in a small team. So, maybe in a more traditional environment, you have like testers in one area, developers in one area. But Agile, I work with the managers and testers and developers all in the same area. And we have daily meetings and make sure that, we're on the same page.
Are you still dividing the team into testers and developers, or are you all both testers and developers?
So technically we do have, roles. I'm a developer and my colleagues are testers or developers. But, I do developing and testing. My testers do developing and testing as well, especially unit tasks, which I might go into closer later. So really we're a tech team, very fine lines. Yeah.
Nice. So how does a normal day look like in your life?
Yeah, so on a normal day, as I mentioned, we do Scrum. And so loosely, all teams kind of take it upon themselves as a framework, and then you customize it. So we start every day with a meeting in the morning. It's called stand up. And everyone working in the sprint just gives, an update on what they're doing today and what they're hoping to accomplish that day and perhaps that week. So you always have an idea of what everyone is trying to accomplish that day and in the sprint.
Yeah.
And it's very important that, especially developers and testers are on the same page about what are we doing today. That's the morning.
And you said that you were working with .NET. What kind of tools do you use when you work with .NET?
Yeah, so I work in .NET framework. So I do C# programming. All my team does that. So when developing, I can actually share another screen because
please do.
This is something that's pretty important in my team and to me. Let me see. We abide by the principle of test-driven development. This has become very popular. There are a lot of methodologies for test-driven development, but the point really is that you start by writing unit tests first. We use NUnit for unit tests. I can talk a little bit more about that, but basically it's kind of the usual intuitive thing is to write code and then see if it passes tests. But with test-driven development, first you write the tests. So first you say, what is my code supposed to do with the test? And then you make sure it fails. You can see here in the diagram because there's no code. And then you write a bit more code, just enough to compile, but it's still supposed to fail. So sometimes it passes there, then the test is wrong. But the point is, after that you implement the logic code to make it pass. And if it passes, then you do the refactoring, making sure that variable names are good and it's a good piece of code that everyone can understand, developers and testers can understand. But this, TDD is something we really enjoy right now because it makes sure partly that code is very organized. So everything is, the unit test is written, everything is blocked. So everything has relevant testing. And then unit tests, the biggest advantage is, of course, that it's automated. So use NUnit for automated testing. And that means that we make sure that it automatically checks the code and see if it passes. This is really important when you're working agilely because you get rapid feedback from customers, especially the managers, and then the managers come to the developers and testers. So all the time, it's rapid change, agile, which is good because that's how you evolve and make a good product. But that means, it's impossible to sit and test everything that we've done and everything that has been done every time. So it's very important that automated unit tests are in place to ensure that everything, if I write code now, it doesn't break anything that already exists. And the code I write now is good and it works. So I can talk a little bit more about NUnit. There are a lot of, NUnit is very popular for C# and .NET. This is an example of how it looks. So you write a test class and a test method, and then you make sure that, the code passes. Let me see here, an example. Yeah, exactly. So this is how a typical NUnit test method looks like. And this is really where the developers and testers start communicating in the first initial phase. So one thing we use is code coverage. I myself just use the inbuilt one in Visual Studio. But here you can see that you can check how much of the code is covered by unit tests. And of course, in a real world scenario with real deadlines, it's very rare that 100% of the code is covered by tests. And that's fine. You have to meet deadlines and such. But the goal is always to have as much covered as possible. But this is where actually the developer can communicate to the tester and show, this is the unit tests. This is what is the point of this piece of code, but I want it to work. So yeah, that's how we use NUnit.
So do you use this? What do you use the coverage for?
The coverage is really partially it's a way to for us to keep tabs on our code quality. So always we can see that it's broken down into how much of our code is covered by tests, by respective tests. And that's a way of keeping tabs of that. It's also a way, I can go a little bit down here to test-driven code review, which we use. So we do a lot of code review. That's traditionally been an issue, code review, because developers, also testers, have a lot of opinions about stuff, and that's kind of an issue because you do code review and you might have different opinions and abrasions to stuff, and that's not always relevant. What's relevant is objectively showing, this is the unit test, and it passes or fails this unit tests. So here we can see the flow we try to use, and initially it's a developer reviewing another developer, but after that our testers Also, if they feel like a piece of code will not work under a certain circumstance or situation, then what we try to do is they will actually write the unit tests to show that, in this situation, this code will not work.
So you communicate for tests, right? So you communicate for tests.
Exactly. And that makes it easy. Developers are also maybe stereotypically not great at communicating, which is getting better. But this means that, you can't really fight if it's wrong, right? You actually objectively can show that this piece of code will not work under certain circumstances. Nice. So we found this is a great way to do code review, actually. Yeah.
Cool. So when you is there any case where you use the code coverage measurement to say that we need to add tests to this module?
Absolutely. There are periods in time as well when deadlines are tough and stuff, and you do get a bit more relaxed about code coverage. But it's important to, that's also something in Scrum, something we use is called retrospectives. So at the end of every sprint, we do go through the process and analyze the code a bit and see, and then we will do the code coverage and see, the code that was written here, how much of it is covered, and do we have to prioritize covering more code in the next sprint? And sometimes we have to do that, or sometimes we have to do that in a couple of months. Yeah.
So you also said that you were working test first or test-driven development.
Yes.
And would you like to describe how you see with the connection between test-driven development and design? Because my students sometimes are struggling with, okay, what am I gonna start with? I'm gonna start with bottom up and start with the small pieces that are easy to write unit tests for, or are you writing top down or larger tests or acceptance tests, but TDD style? So
yeah, so this is like an ongoing problem that all developers face. But the reason why I like TDD so much is it's important that code is it's written in a way where it's modularized and it's every method does one thing, and really unit tests are, and that is very difficult to do upfront by design. It's hard to start by the easiest thing first and write code up to bottom. But unit testing or test-driven development forces one to break down the big problem into smaller problems to solve. So there are a lot of ways to do it, but I usually will first analyze what's the problem, break it down into smaller problems, and then I will just start writing testing methods for those. So it's actually not very important that it is perfectly ordered by business logic from the beginning, because at the end you can always go in and refactor it, make sure the steps follow the business logic. But for me, it's important to just break down the big problem into smaller problems to solve, first by writing the test method and then writing the code that runs through it. Yeah.
Nice. So do you write one test and then some implementation for that test, or do you write many tests and then finishing them off one by one?
If I'm new to a system, I'll probably write one and then write the code for that. And then the more you are familiar with the system and with the business logic of the code, you might be able to write many and run through. But really, I think it's nice to just write one and make sure it passes. Yeah, so I try to hold myself to that. Yeah.
So do you come to the so my students are also working TDD. So I see it as a good way of learning how to write unit tests. And something they are also thinking of or struggling with is this: okay, I have these private methods and I want to test those. Should I either use some kind of magic framework reflection stuff to test these private methods, or should I just test these through the public methods? What would you say? How do you work with this?
I mean, it does depend on the case, but really, I try to start with public methods. There are great frameworks to use, but probably keep it simple, stupid is a good principle to abide by.
Yeah.
And then this style of development also makes sure that you can actually start. You don't have the blank canvas problem, because you can start and then at the end you can always go in and refactor and make sure that everything looks good in that way.
Yeah, nice.
I did actually want to name another testing framework we do use, which is called Selenium.
Nice.
Which is
please tell us what that is about, because I have not really touched that in the course yet. So, but it's highly relevant for their next assignment. So.
Oh, all right, great head start. Selenium is very popular to use, actually, especially in finance, and there are different Selenium testing frameworks. We use Selenium WebDrive, and we use it for UI testing. UI is actually misspelled here. It's supposed to be UI or GUI. So it's the graphical user interface. And here there are two things. I actually made a note of this because I wanted to talk about it. But there are really two things we focus on, and that's first, functionality testing. So here we see, this is the graphic interface of a company that I worked on. And there are a lot of fields in which the user can type whatever they want, and there are a lot of navigation links. And then there's the graphics, how it looks. And functionality testing, which is the first one, is just making sure that input fields work correct. If you type in certain things, if you type in, information in different data formats, data types, if they work, if navigation works as expected. And another thing there is also security. You do touch on that with Selenium. Input fields, if you're able to just type in whatever and it just goes into the system, and you can type in inject code that goes into database. So Selenium testing is actually something that our testers do, not our developers. But it's an important part of working with the graphic interfaces, doing UI testing. And the second part of that is just the UI testing. So making sure everything looks good, that you can click around, and browser compatibility. Another important thing is accessibility, especially when you work with in finance or government regulated stuff. It's really important to make sure that you follow, W3C guidelines on accessibility, to make sure that people using, disabled people using different tools can access your website and do stuff. So it's, if you work on like Skatteverket's website, very important, or especially, Försäkringskassan or a hospital website or something, very big focus on accessibility, and that you do with Selenium testing.
Nice.
Here you can see
what kind of help do you get from Selenium to do these kind of accessibility testing?
Yeah, so we do use Selenium, or our testers actually Selenium, and here we can see an example of. Basically, you can make like a click robot, we call it, where you just click around, type different things. You can mimic accessibility tools, clicking around things, making sure they work. Putting in different data in different formats, making sure nothing is vulnerable, that no vulnerable information is easily accessible. So basically just automated clicking around the website, typing stuff. And that's something we do use a lot in our test and code review. Selenium, making, it's really hard to always go in and check the product and click around everywhere each time. So we do have automated Selenium tests, which make sure that everything always works regressively, even when implementing new features and stuff. And that's a way to give feedback in the code review as well. Our testers very often give feedback by showing, Selenium output that shows that, some link is broken, or the navigation doesn't work, or not accessible, etc.
Nice. So yeah, is there anything you would like to say to my students, like give them some kind of advice or something that they should focus on? So they are second year now in their studies. Is there anything special they should like focus on or do besides their study or something like that?
Obviously you have to have ground knowledge of the tools and testing. But actually my last slide here is really to focus on, quality development. To ensure quality development, you ensure quality teamwork. You can use whatever state-of-the-art framework you want to, and it will never create a good product or project if the team is not working well together. And this is something to keep in mind, in the future when you guys want to go into the workplace and join teams. I really hope that you focus on joining teams that are, have a lot of points that I pointed out here, encouraging environments, ask questions, making sure that it's an equal team, diverse team perhaps, and having collective ownership of everything. It's kind of stereotypical that testers and developers don't like each other that much in teams because I make something I'm proud of and the testers just want to break it. And that's kind of a harmful thing to have in a team, that you really have to focus on leaving behind us.
And I mean, I'm so happy that you say this, because this is something that I've felt for years, and that by having equal teams and by allowing people to be different, and you get a lot of different strengths into the teams. And I mean,
I agree.
If we have all these different kinds of people who are also testing our products and thinking on how to solve the customers' needs, then suddenly we get a much better possibility to actually capture a larger group of the customers.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Another thing is, when I first joined the team, I was, everyone always said, this is how we've always done things. And I didn't really question it because you're just grateful to have a job. But really, we have to realize that developers and testers are very valuable in the job market. And it's very important to come in and make sure that, a lot of teams don't have peer review, code review, and test review. They'll say, like, our developers don't like talking to people or something. And really, it's important to make sure that we have code review, test review. A lot of people like pair programming and pair testing. And those tools are very important to come in on. And if they already are not in place in the team, lift it up. Make sure that there is a place for that in the team, because it will definitely ensure quality work. Yeah.
Nice. So would you say that this sort of teamwork, where you actually work pretty close together and you give each other feedback during these meetings, and you give each other critique perhaps during this meeting, doesn't that also require a lot more on the interpersonal skills of the developers and testers?
Absolutely. It's much more difficult for everybody to sit in their own room, tester, developers, working on their stuff, and then the day before you have to deliver the product or the project, that you have to somehow glue together everything, and everyone has to explain how they've done, and that's insanely difficult and will not result in quality work. It's actually I found it's absolutely best when you are one with the team, and you do have daily check-ins, small check-ins, where you can much more easily lift up problems, lift up questions. So that's a very valuable thing that I really value in my team.
So I hope my students know pair programming, but maybe they haven't heard about mob programming. So what is the difference?
So pair programming is just sitting two people programming. Traditionally, it's probably a senior and a junior engineer or something, but usually it's actually not. Usually it's you absolutely do not have to be a junior programmer to be interested in pair or mob programming. But with pair programming or pair testing, you sit together, two people, and you program and you show and you talk, and you have your own rubber ducky, With mob programming, which is actually a very hot thing right now in tech, you sit in multiple people. So it'll often be 5 or 6 people. It'll actually often be all the developers on the team and all the testers on the team. And you will sit in a conference room oftentimes with the code up on a projector. And you will just sit and talk through the code, talk through business logic, and and I say business logic, but that's actually just what the point is of the project. What the customers expect this feature to be. So mob programming will just be like multiple people sitting and going through everything. It'll often be half a day or all day where you just program, making sure the requirements. Often there's a manager there as well, making sure the requirements meet with the business logic, and oftentimes then you will go on testing in that same mob. So it's actually a really fun way. It's probably not realistic to do every day or for all projects all day, but it's a great way to make sure that all the code is concise through the program, making sure that everybody is on the same page about how the code is supposed to look, because it's important that the whole system has code that kind of looks the same, honestly. Not necessarily just some do spaces and some do tabs. That's kind of irrelevant, but more how do we want the code to look, and how do we want the unit tests to look, and what's our goal with code coverage. And so that's actually something I really recommend that you guys lift up when you join a tech team, is that trying out mob programming can be very valuable for the teamwork.
Awesome. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You want to add something lastly before I end this recording?
Not really. It was a lot of fun to join you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to say again that my company is called Crude Tech, and you can check it out if you want to reach out to me.
Yeah, do that. They have an excellent vision, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.